Welcome! This tutorial shows you how to create a frequency distribution for categorical data using formulas. We can use both formulas and the pivot table tool to create a frequency distribution. I have another tutorial on using the pivot table to create frequency distributions. The link for that video is in the description box below. Alright, let's see how we would create a frequency distribution. I have data here for 50 students, and I collected data about their major, the grade on exam, hours studied, and so on. But the categorical data here would be major. Gender is also a categorical variable, and student status would also be a categorical variable. But let's use major. And what I'd like to do first is to copy and paste this column of data, major, onto a new sheet so it's not so cluttered. So if we click in the major box and then press Control, Shift, and down key, it'll highlight the entire column. And then let's do Control Copy to copy it, add another sheet, and then Control V to paste it. And I'm going to move that heading a little bit over so it's a little clearer. So now we have a clean sheet and just major, and what I want to do is create a frequency distribution on the major. Okay, now what I want to do is create a unique list from all of these majors. I have marketing, management, accounting. I don't want to have to sift through this entire list and see how many different categories there are. I'd like Excel to do that for me. Okay, so in order to do that, let's highlight this row again, Control Shift down key, and let's go to the Data tab, and on the Data tab where it says Filter Advanced, we have a dialog box. It has A1 through A51. That's perfect. And we want to filter the list in place. No, we want to copy it to another location. Copy to, let's have it put it here, so that would be E11. Okay, and then unique records only, so that it'll give us a list of all of the majors. So we can see, without going through this entire list, we can see we have 4 majors: marketing, management, accounting, and finance. So now that we've created our unique list, let us create a frequency distribution for that list. I want to know how many marketing majors I have, how many management majors I have, how many accounting majors I have, and how many finance majors I have. Now there's another way to do this using pivot tables, but this video tutorial was specifically created to show you how to do it using formulas. Okay, so let's put a heading here and we'll call it frequency. And what we can do is make it bold like the major and the same font size. And what we can also do is, since these are headings, we can make it look a little nicer by filling it in with some color. Let's make it turquoise. And so now we have some nice headings. And to make this look like a nicer table, what we can do is actually make it look like a table. Go to the Home tab over here where we have the borders choices. We can say all borders. And now we have some borders around there, so it makes it look like a little bit of a table. Now let's see how we would create a frequency distribution. To do this by hand, we would go through this entire list and count how many marketing majors we have, and we could use tallies and check off and count by hand how many marketing, how many management, how many accounting, how many finance. Or we can use a function in Excel called Countif, and that is Countif. Now you can see there's a choice of Countif or Countifs. I like using Countifs always because Countif without the S is only for one criterion. Countifs is for one and for more, so it always works. So I just always use Countifs. All right, and then in parentheses, you need the criteria range. Now that is the entire range of cells from A2 to A51. And so I'm going to highlight that, but now I'm going to press function F4, and what that does is it turns it into absolute cell references, because relative cell reference wouldn't work. As I copy and paste the formula down, I want it to still keep A2 through A51. If I use relative cell references, when I copy the formula into the next cell, it would go to A3 and then A4 and then A5. I want the cell reference to be fixed, so it is an absolute cell reference. And then comma, we have the criteria would be in this cell for marketing majors. So I would click on marketing, and so it gives it E12. Now that's a relative cell reference, because when we move down to the next cell, it'll be E13 and then E14 and then E15. And that's fine, because I first want to count marketing majors, then we'll count management majors, and then we'll count accounting majors and finance majors. So the second part of this formula is, of course, a relative reference, but the first has to be an absolute cell reference. All right, think about that again. The first part has to be absolute cell reference because we are looking at the same list always from A2 through A51. That doesn't change, but the criteria changes because first we're looking at marketing majors, then we're going to look at management majors, so that has to be a relative cell reference. Let's close the parentheses and let's hit enter, and we can see we have 12 marketing majors in the list of 50. So instead of counting how many marketing majors we have, Excel uses the function to do it for us. All right, now we want to count up management majors, accounting majors, and finance majors. And what we can do is use the fill handle here, pull it down, release, and Excel did that for us. We had a total of 50 students, so we can put a total here, and then in this cell we can say equal sum. To get the total, we would have this range of cells from F12 to F15 and close the parentheses, and the total should be 50, and it is. We can actually bold that so that we have a total of 50. So we just use a very simple function in Excel, Countif, to count up all of the majors. And so you can have a list. We only had 50 here, but imagine if you had 2,000, a list of 2,000 students, you wouldn't count them by hand. You could just use the Excel function. All right, now, if you're learning about creating frequency distribution tables, you'll know that one of the things we like to do in statistics is to create another column for what we call relative frequencies. And the relative frequency is relative to the total. So it's always something out of something. Instead of saying there are 12 marketing students, we would say 12 divided by 50, and that would give us the proportion of marketing students out of the total. So instead of a count of, say, 12 marketing majors, it would give us a proportion of 12 out of the total. In this case, that would be 12 out of 50. Okay, so let's say we want to calculate the relative frequency. We have a column here for relative frequency, and the formula would obviously be 12 divided by 50. Now, the 12 divided by 50 would go here as a formula, so it would be F12, because that's the cell, divided by F16. The problem is if we copy it as a relative cell reference, that's good for 12, because the next time when I copy that formula to this cell here, I want 21 divided by 50, then I want 7 divided by 50, then I want 10 divided by 50. So those are all relative cell references because it moves from 12 to 21 to 7 to 10, but the 50 divided by 50 divided by the total has to be an absolute cell reference, because we don't want, when we copy the formula, it divides it by 50 in G12, but then when we copy that formula to G13, it's going to divide it by the cell under 50, and you're going to get an error message. So let's type in equal, and then 12 is F12, and that's a relative cell reference, that's fine, divided by 50, but we want that to be an absolute cell reference because we want all of the numbers divided by 50. So hit function F4, And you can see there that there are dollar signs there, so it's not just F16, it's $F and $16, so it fixes it, so that cell reference is absolute. It doesn't change when we copy it down the column. And let me hit enter, and so 12 divided by 50 is 24. And now let's copy that formula down this row, and we get the numbers. Now let's just take a look in the cell here, and you'll see that this is F13, this is F14, this is F15. So you can see F12, 13, 14, and 15 divided by, but all of them are divided by F16. So that is fixed. All right. So make sure you do that. Now we also need a total here. The total here would be adding up all of these numbers. So we would do equal SUM, and then we would add up these numbers here. And what do you suppose that's going to add up to? That should add up to 1, right? Because it's out of 1 out of a whole. And it does. So that worked out beautifully. And then the last column, again, if you're learning statistics, you'll know that we always do frequency, relative frequency, and then we do percentage. And the percentage is simply moving the decimal place to the right 2 spaces or multiplying by 100, and so 0.24 is really 24%, 0.42 is really 42%, and so on, so it would add up to 100 instead of 1. But sometimes we like to display things as a percentage, so let's do that. I'm just formatting this so that it looks the same as the other part of the table, so we have a nice table. By the way, let me just take a look at the relative frequency. We have something called collectively exhaustive and mutually exclusive. Collectively exhaustive means that all the categories add up to 1 or 100%. That means collectively it exhausts all possibilities. And so this is a collectively exhaustive list. If, for example, I had a history major as part of this list, but I didn't account for it here, then the list would not be collectively exhaustive and it wouldn't add up to 1. And the other term you should know is mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive means that you can't be both a marketing major and a management major at the same time. You can't be a marketing and an accounting major at the same time. Now there are schools that allow that as a double major, and if that's the case, if somebody is both a marketing major and a management major, then you don't have a mutually exclusive list. Okay, so now in order to turn this into a percentage, this column into a percentage, I can use a formula by multiplying each of these by 100, so that 0.24 times 100 is 24%, or I can use a little trick that Excel allows us, and that is to copy and paste. Let's copy and paste these numbers into the column next to it. Okay, now to copy this entire column, now to start, we'll copy this entire column of G15 over to H12 through 15, but we really can't do that because if we copy it, we're really copying the formula. We don't want to copy the formula because then it'll, well, let me show you what will happen. If I copy this copy and I paste this here, then you're going to get numbers that are using the relative cell references, and we don't want to do that. Okay, Control Z. So what we need to do is copy this number into this cell. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this cell G12 into H12. So we type in equal G12, and so we're giving it a cell reference for just this cell. So we're telling Excel to copy what's in G12 into H12, and then we can, since we use relative cell reference, you can see it's a relative cell reference, we can just pull that down, and actually the whole way down, and have all the numbers copied and pasted. And now we want to turn these into a percentage, and the easiest way to do that, there are 2 ways to do that. You can use a formula and multiply it by 100, or you can go to the home ribbon, click on number format, and you see here where the number format is, we go down to percentage and just click on that, and it's as easy as that. Okay, Now, that works better than multiplying by 100% because sometimes when you use a formula and use another formula inside of a formula, it gets confusing. This way, the number that's inside this cell is still the 0.24. All right, so we have the percentages column here, and we see that this all adds up to 100%. So really, relative frequency and percentage are the same thing. It's just expressed in different ways. Relative frequency is expressed in a decimal as a proportion, and by moving that decimal to the right 2 spaces, you get it expressed as a percentage. All right, now let's take a look at how we can format this table so it looks a little bit nicer. We can go here to all borders, okay, and let's also bold the total column. Now that we've created a table, we have a nice table here, frequency, relative frequency, and percentage. Let's see how we can create a chart from this frequency table. First thing we do is highlight the majors and the frequency column. Don't highlight the total. Now go to Insert. Now go to the column here where it says Insert Column or Bar Chart, 2D Clustered Column. Okay, and that is what we usually call a bar chart. And you can see it gives us a frequency distribution for marketing, management, accounting, and finance. And it takes it right off of this chart. Okay, let's do this for percentage. Okay, let's select marketing, management, accounting, finance, and percentage. Okay, and I'm holding the control key down so that it highlights both of those columns. Now let's go to Insert, 2D Column Chart, and now I have a percentage, and I can change that title by clicking into it and say percentage of the majors. Okay, so now I have marketing, management, accounting, and finance majors, and you can see the bars look the same except that the legend here on the left is frequency over here, and the legend over here is percentage. So whatever it is that you're interested in. Let's take a look at different types of chart type. We can change the chart type. I just right-clicked into the area and change the chart type, and you can see we can change it to a pie chart. That would be interesting. Okay, and there you can see. Now this doesn't mean anything without a legend. Really need a legend there. Add data labels. And let's put the category names there. And so now I have marketing, management, finance, and accounting. We could also change this chart here, and instead of having a column chart, we could change that to a bar chart. And so now we have the bars going this way. So you see you have a lot of options in formatting the chart. And over here, this plus sign is the chart elements. You can add or remove different labels, different legends. Okay, you can format the style, the color, and here you can turn on and off which categories you want to look at. Okay, by deselecting them with the check mark. Okay, we've seen how to create a table, a frequency table, relative frequency percentage, and how to create some charts from the table, and this was all without using the pivot table tool. I have another video that shows you how to do exactly this using the pivot table tool. Sometimes you want to use formulas, sometimes you want to use the pivot table tool. The difference between using formulas and a pivot table tool is if any of the raw data changes and you use formulas, then your output would be updated immediately. Whereas if any of these values change, let's say a finance major becomes a management major, when you use a pivot table tool, it stays. It doesn't update it. The pivot table, the advantage is it is fast and it is easy to use, as you'll see in my other video. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you learned something.